Okay, can you tell us about this bike here?
Yeah. Well, I suppose in the old days lugs like this would have been very popular, but nowadays people go in a lot for, you know, just mass-produced things. But I still like that sort of thing, and there's lots of older boys still do like that type of thing. So I just learned how to make bicycle frames, and then gradually I got into making better types, and I made that one for myself.
Okay. And how did you source the lugs?
I forget, I probably saw an advert somewhere that there's a guy over in Chingford near Epping Forest who still makes these lugs. So I got his name and address and sent away, and they cost £70 a set, those lugs.
Okay, they are quite beautiful.
Because the guy has to, you know, make them,
okay,
hand cut them.
So they are cut out by hand. I think I heard that they use jeweler's saws too, like they use jewellery
cutting. Yeah, I
cutting.
suppose little fettling files and so on. Now you may have a template to go over to obviously cut round, but they are hand cut lugs.
The tubular parts are brazed onto the lugs, is that right?
That's right. You get the lugs, and then this is the tubing. This is Reynolds 531 tubing. You cut it to the size, and then you have to miter it as well, which means you curve it so it tubes fit into each other neatly. And then you set it up, and then you have to use the jig, which is this. This is a frame building jig. And so that you have everything in line. So no use having the frame twisted and so on, that one wheel's here and the front wheel's here, so everything has to be in line. And then once they're set up like that, you flux them, which is this powder to allow the brazing to go in. And the brazing is done with acetylene and oxygen at a certain temperature. Now, it's not welding. Welding is a different thing altogether. Brazing is where you heat the metal up to a certain degrees, and then the braze flows in neatly and then hardens up. And it's really terrific job. Like, you're not going to pull it apart.
Okay. Are they still using lugs on newer bikes? I think I understand Bianchi still use lugs.
Some of them are using lugs, but they're not brazed anymore. They're all bonded now.
Okay, that means with glue?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Can you tell us about what do you consider when you're cutting the tubes to size to fit the lugs or to build a bike? What?
Well, you see, the geometry of the bike depends on what you want the bicycle for, or what your height is. If you're a small person, the bicycle is usually quite extreme lugs here, maybe 74, 75 degrees, because a shorter person with the shorter legs needs this to have his leg in the right position. A tall fella would go up to about a 72. The touring bikes would be much slacker on the angles for comfort.
Okay, is that because the shock's absorbed through the frame? That's what I was told.
That's right.
Okay.
But a racing man is willing to put up with the shocks for rigidity, because he's younger and he's fitter and he's up out of the saddle and so on. So he's not sitting sort of plodding along in the saddle like a tourist who's going to feel every bump. Racing men have to go for a more rigid bike because it's not whipping about then.
Okay.
And a track bike, of course, it used to be track bikes were considered very, very steep, but nowadays road bikes are very steep as well. There's very little difference between track bikes and road bikes nowadays as regards geometry.
Okay.
Roads are so good now, you see.
And regarding the geometry of the frame or the length of a frame, a person who's like 6 foot tall, I'm trying to ask, what are some like basic guidelines for
I know what you're getting at, yes. But the top tubes are pretty standard these days. Now, a small bike, you can't go really short because then the wheels be banging.
Right.
You have to go into 26-inch smaller wheels, which people don't want to do. So you'll find that the shortest top tube on a small bike will be about 21 and a half inches. I still talk in inches, I can't get my head around metric stuff. A 22-inch bike for a fellow about my size would usually have a 22-inch top tube centre to centre. But you never get much longer than 22 and a half, because then there's going to be gaps. Even big guys would use bikes with a 22-inch, 22 and a half at the very most. They just have the saddle further back and a longer stem. You're dealing with 700C wheels, and they're going to have to fit a small bike and they're going to have to fit a large bike as well. So therefore, there can't be much differences in the geometry. What you do is you you find your position by having your saddle up higher or more further back, or having a longer stem or wider handlebars.
Okay. So the angles of the lugs, they're the same. You can use the same lugs for a road bike or for a track bike or for a touring bike, could you? It's just a matter of changing the length of the...
Well, in the lugs there is a bit of flexibility. I could have this here at a 72, or I could have it at 73 or 74 by just moving it a little bit. There's a little bit of movement. So whenever I set it up in the jig, I'll set the jig up 74 or 73, and the frame will fit into it. And then when I brace it, it obviously stays at that angle.
Okay, I see. Okay, can you tell us how you started building bikes, how you acquired the tools that you have, and
Well, about 25 years ago, I came back from Germany. I'd been living in Germany for about 10 years, and I started cycling again. And then I decided, with all the kids running about here, I wanted to have a cycling club. Seeing all these kids running about. So I formed a club called the Saints Cycling Club, because there's a couple of schools here, Saint this and Saint that. So they were known as the Saints. And they were brilliant kids, won championships and so on. And all the old friends of mine in the cycling fraternity were giving me frames and wheels and this and another thing, and I was building all the bikes for the kids. And then some of them had to be repaired. So from that I decided to get into building wheels, and then I decided I'll have a go at building frames as well. And it just sort of crept along and happened.
Okay.
I came back from Germany about 1980, so it was about 1982 I started this club.
Okay, great.
And Paul Slane was one of the members of the club, you know, who owns Slane's Bicycle Shop, and he was the All-Ireland champion twice, the road champion. So some of them are great riders, some great talent.
And the equipment, can you tell us a bit about the equipment involved?
Yes, well, in those days, hand-built frames were still popular, so there was adverts in the cycling magazine for jigs and so on, and the tools. And there was a place in Ebbw in Wales was making equipment. So I went over, and that's where I bought that jig from. It's just a cheap jig for a person that wants to build bikes at home. It's nothing like the professional jigs that they have at Raleigh or Viking and so on. And the same with the fork. You can't really see there, the fork jig. They're all just for the homemaker.